Hello, this is David Mixner. Happy Memorial Day to you. Well, tomorrow's June 1st and summer reading begins. At least I hope you have some books for the summer. And I want to recommend to you 5 books. That's 10. 5 books that you might not have read from the past, that you might not think about, but which I think are must-read books in your lifetime. Number 1, I want to do The Guns of August with Barbara Tuchman. It was published in 1962. It won the Pulitzer Prize, and it's as relevant today as it was in 1962. It talks about the days leading up to World War I and how nations could have avoided war, how monarchies took us into World War I, where 25 million people died. It is a must-read. You can find it on Amazon or any other seller. But I think that you'd be doing yourself a disservice in your lifetime not to read this as a base of knowledge of what leads us to war and how it could have been avoided. Number 2 is The Master at the Senate, Robert Caro, who has done a multi-volume history of the Lyndon Johnson life. It is perhaps the best biography I've ever done of any president ever. But this one I particularly like. It's the second volume of his history of Lyndon Johnson, because the first 100 pages are the best description of the Senate and the workings of the Senate that I've ever read in my life. If you do nothing else, read this book and read the whole series, actually. I couldn't put it down, but at least read that first 100 pages. And you will be light years ahead of anyone else's knowledge on the U.S. Senate. Now, this one you probably haven't heard of. Number 3, The Coming Anarchy. The Coming Anarchy is by Robert Kaplan, and it was started as an article in the Atlantic magazine. It is without a doubt one of the most important reads you could do today. It's an easy read. It's like 150, 180 pages. But it talks about how the colonial powers created nations that were destined to lead to anarchy and war. And it also talks about how those boundaries, those artificial boundaries created by the colonial powers, will cause the collapse of many nation states like the Sudan, South Sudan, Somalia, perhaps even Nigeria, the problems in the Balkans. It is a must read to understand the current geopolitical politics and the dangers lurking. And never have I seen a book become more true than it has today. Failed nation states are the greatest threat to our stability. I hope that you take the time and read this quick read. There's a book that just came out in the last year, and that is number 4, The Secret City, The Hidden History of Gay Washington. It is not a sort of who's gay and who's not. It takes place viewing the history of homosexuality in its place since Franklin Roosevelt. And it is an extraordinary history of LGBTQ plus involvement in Washington, D.C., the Lavender Scare, the homosexual purges under Joseph McCarthy, and so forth, and how we factored into the politics of Washington, D.C. It is a must-read for LGBTQ people. And number 5 is And the Band Played On by Randy Silks. It is the best book on the AIDS pandemic, and how Washington turned a blind eye to those dying, and how the pandemic began, the AIDS epidemic began, and how official Washington turned its back on our community, and how thousands have died needlessly. It is a powerful book, not only from the sense of a geopolitics situation, but also on the research battles between researchers. And finally, it is a devastating book on dealing what it did to the gay male community. It is a must read. Now, as a bonus book, I want to suggest Stranger Among Friends, written by an extraordinary, bright, and clever man. It's sort of a memoir. I understand it was supposed to be 800 pages. It was sliced down to 300, mostly dealing on with his politics. And it's written by David Mixner. And it's an extraordinary book. It's a bestseller. And if you maybe have time after those first 5, I would suggest you read it. Most importantly, 2 things most importantly. Please subscribe. It really, really helps me. And number 2, please read. We have become a nation of 15-minute hits on social media. It's not reading. Reading is essential. Reading creates knowledge. Knowledge creates power. Power creates our ability to create change. I love you all. Please read any one of these 5 books or all of them, and you will be a much more intelligent person able to deal with the world we live in. Peace.